Hi. Today we have to talk about Goblumu and some of the sentiments and thoughts around this activity that I've seen a few people spread, which I think needs some context and some explaining. To be clear, if you aren't familiar with what this activity is, it's a new epic dash event activity that has epic equipment that you can get 10 pieces of every single day. And you can auto battle it, you can do whatever, but here are the available sets that you have access to. You can get HP set, you can get speed set, you can crit set, and you can also get destruction. Something that I haven't seen anyone talk about is that, side note, for whatever reason, if you really wanted to, you could also directly convert your runs in Gablomu into charms. Now, I'd probably say the 99.99% of players, if you are someone that are basically an epicseven fan and aren't in the early game, yes, it does make sense for Golomu in most cases to not really be worth it for you. But pause, because before you write off this gear, we need to talk exactly about what we're talking about here, or we need to actually define what the Goblomu gear is and what the actual uses for it are. Because there are people that are writing off Goblomu as, okay, if you're not a new account that just made your account last week, throw this gear into the trash, which is just not actually true. So what I wanted to instead illustrate to you is a couple of the pieces of gear that we've been given, and let's just take a comparison of what endgame gear honestly, in most cases, can look like. So I have some pieces that I've been rolling and, from Rift and because of all the activities, I've got something that's 93 equipment score, which is pretty low even for endgame standards, but it's for a set that's a little bit more difficult for me to farm for outside of Rift. So I decided to roll for this. I decided to end up, I reforged it and it looks fine to me. I may end up using this on someone in the future. Now, there are also 88 pieces, and I bought this randomly because I've been doing arena, but look, this rolled 91, which is even lower, and it's an 88 set piece of gear. Now, all of this translates and makes sense in the context of Goblomu because, well, take a look at the actual equipment score of the Goblomu pieces. We have a sword, which I'm using for, my golem thing that I have to do for the Hero's Adventure path. This is 83 and it's not fantastic. Okay, I get it. You get less main stat and stuff like that. But what if you were to, I don't know, say use this on a helmet or maybe even on a chest for a character that maybe doesn't need that much main stat specifically, or for less impactful specific slots? Well, for my helmet's case, I've got 14% HP and 31 crit damage on a helmet that, I get it, probably rolled reasonably high, I would say. But in most cases, the issue here is that you can't write off a piece like this if you're someone that is unable to gear characters. Before we even talk about gear score, or before we even talk about whether it's valuable to even roll this gear, the average player, let's say this wasn't crit set and this was speed set, the average player can probably find a use for a piece like this. You could put this on anyone, Bellion, any crit bruiser that you want to think of, APOC if you're a starting player, maybe Ravi, depending on what set it is and stuff like that. But HP bruisers in general, HP, crit damage, defense, this is something that you can find some use for. Even Brig, if you're really interested, if you want specific damage. And that's where the crux of my conversation about, or that's the point of my video today. This set has honestly been wildly, I don't even know what the right word for it is, but it's been talked about without any context at all. And there are people that are saying it's not worth it at all. And there's people that are saying it's super great. And as with most conversations on this, in this game, there's an actual middle ground, or there's context and there's a swing in the middle, or a little spot in the middle that you need to sit in, because this gear is bad and also good, but you need to understand why you would or wouldn't use the gear. For me specifically, I'm someone that likes doing things like expeditions. I like things like my world boss teams being fully geared. And for me specifically, having gear like this is great. Now, of course, I'm someone with literally 2,500 pieces of gear, and I probably, not even probably, I am a hoarder, but you have to understand that for people that don't want to re-gear their account, because, by the way, in case you didn't realize it, in 2024, free unequip is still not free, or unequips are still not free, rather, and free unequip isn't permanent. So therefore, if you don't want to have to move around characters, some of this gear is actually fine to put on your tertiary or sub DPS, your PvE units. Now, again, this will not be perfect for certain encounters where all your PvE stats super matter. I can think of like a couple of Abyss stages perhaps where you do need a bit higher gear score, or especially if you're doing Holo Trials. Yes, okay. Sometimes the Goblins gear will not work for some of these more insanely difficult content, but for my Hell raid, your Nightmare raid, the non Hall of Trials activities, this gear will be satisfactory if you just want to clear some of this content to the average person's level. And again, in case you were wondering, the rolls on the gear, I get it, can be really low. And if you also aren't familiar with it either, like the maximum roll for certain stats is like skewed. If I'm not mistaken, everything is between the 5 and 6% roll, except for speed, which I think is at 2. I'm not exactly sure what crit and crit damage is. I think they are respectively like 2 to 3 or like 3 to 4. Whatever the case is, you still have, again, the potential for stats to roll really well. Now, okay, now you're probably thinking at this point, okay, Connor, well, like, all right, the gear has like some use, but we get so much gear already. I mean, have you seen all the side stories and the activities that we get? I mean, truth be told, if you compare some of this gear to, let's say, any of the Nightmare raid, which is a bit unfair, that activity is a little bit more difficult, but if you compare this to any of the side story gear that we've gotten in the past, and I'm trying to find one right now. Okay, I don't even know if okay, it's definitely in my inventory. If you take a look at some of the side story or the random activity gear that we've been given, like this ring, well, guess what? As you can tell by this ring that rolled halfway through, it's also not insanely high gear score either. Getting something like 90 equipment score or 95, 100 is perfect, and those are great pieces of gear, don't get me wrong, but you're not guaranteed to get those in general. And the other argument that I've heard a lot of people talk about is, well, oh, well, the 200 energy that you'd use would be better used for Rift and blah, blah, blah. Guys, in almost no feasible universe have I ever seen anyone stay awake 24/7 to use every single second of their energy to maximize their energy every day on epicseven. And while I understand it is a 200 energy sink, daily you get well over 400 to 500 energy depending on what activities you're doing and what you're purchasing, and half of it dedicated towards potentially getting a usable PvE piece is not a crime. Now, it's not going to be the most energy efficient thing in the entire world. However, if you're a new player, it might actually be, just because, again, some of these alternative pieces that you're getting don't look great either. A piece like this, for instance, starts at 33 equipment score, but sometimes you don't like the main stats. Sometimes, literally, they are 78 like main stat rolls, so like even the main stats here won't even end up being perfect. And I mean, seriously, if you look at all the different gear that we've been given over the years, 75, 70, like 70, 78, whatever the case is, not only are sometimes these pieces usable and rollable, there are people that actually use them and for some reason are not willing to give Goblins a try. Now, okay, at this point, you may also be thinking to yourself, all right, well, like, what's the worst that could happen, right? Like, do you actually have evidence that this new gear that you could get as well is actually, or this side story gear that you have is also bad? Well, I compiled an Imgur album of some of the gear that I've rolled more recently with tragic, but honestly usable substats. This panoramic goggles, for instance, it's a 78 helmet, and it's crit set with decent attack and decent crit damage. If I wanted to put this on my golem gear, or my golem team, which I now have to have geared, by the way, because we have to do 110 of those for the hero's path, well, this is a piece that I might use on a character. This very infamous boot, by the way, which I will never use, is still something that a lot of people recommend and talk about because, well, it's destruction set. You want it, and it's attack percent, and how many other sources of this are you going to have? Furthermore, they even give us some really, really unusable pieces of gear that feel really weird and awful to use in most cases, including this sword, which if you guys aren't familiar with what this is, it's from like some side story activity or whatever. but it has 7 HP, 7 attack, ER, and 4 crit rate on a counter sword. Now, not only does that mean that if you're using this on a DPS, you're missing out on flat attack because it's level 78, but it's also got really, really poor rolls. Now, again, the point of my video today was not to scold anyone for trying Goblomu or for, avoiding using Goblomu, but my point is that gatekeeping people using or doing this activity is ridiculous because in most cases, players don't have nearly as much gear as you think they do. Now, again, I know that some players like to use fribbles and some people like to shoot for the moon and then, land among the stars type deal. But if you're someone that doesn't have perfect gear, there is literally no reason for you not to complete this activity. Now, I mentioned earlier that certain roles only give you a certain spread or you only have a certain range. But the truth is that even for something like speed gear, yes, okay, you may only be able to get to something like 12 or 14 speed. But a 14 speed, I get it, it would be a penta roll, is still usable for characters. Now, you're not going to be speed contesting with some of these characters, but someone like Laia, someone like Conqueror Lilius maybe, pretty much any slow warrior or anything of that nature that would appreciate having speed will have to use a piece like this. Now, I don't even want to get into some of the horror stories of the gear or the units and the builds that I've seen from players across the years of what they've used to make a character work. But to put it simply, I've seen worse decisions than farming Goblomu when it comes to trying to make units. Yes, okay, arguably it won't be the max efficiency, and in most cases I understand why people would recommend you not to farm Goblomu if you're an endgame player. But if you aren't a mega whale, if you're not a 4 to 6 year veteran, consider farming Goblomu and see how it rolls. And before we end today's video, I have arguably the most important thing that I wanted to talk about of all, which is the gear itself is not even supposed to be touted necessarily as a good performing piece of gear. It's supposed to be touted as a good or a suitable and decent set of gear that rolls easy or is very easy to roll. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I have one of these pieces in my inventory, and I just wanted to show you guys a test of exactly what I'm talking about here and what I actually think the most impactful, I guess I don't have it. Well, we'll do one, I guess, while I'm in the back. I want to show you guys what the actual value of this Goblomu piece or the Goblomu gear is by clearing one right now. Now, of course, this activity is also super easy to do. You can literally auto background battle it, which makes it even easier. But I mean, come on, I saw one person in a stove comment somewhere say that it's hard to clear. Okay, you're obviously joking, but okay, and hold on. You guys can't even see the piece I just got. This is live. This is not scripted or anything. You can't use a piece like this on no one in your account. On no character in your account can you use a 5 crit chance and 8 crit damage roll piece of gear. Are you for real? This is usable. It literally the comedy writes itself. This is a very usable piece of gear. And you might be thinking to yourself oh, well, okay, Connor, what could you possibly say is, the best part of the Goblomu gear? Oh, okay, I guess it reset again. Really, Roz? Okay, and I can't even control my menu. All right, the best part about Goblomu is not the rolls. It's not the performance of the gear. It's the fact that when I press auto select, I click use powder only, and I click plus 15, that says 61 powder to max. To plus 15, a piece of gear. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, oh, well, Connor, 61, that's still a lot. That's a ridiculous amount. And let's say, for whatever reason, I roll this and okay, yeah, as as I expected, this piece looks like trash, okay? Like, yeah, I had the proper rolls and I quad rolled into flat HP. And you're like, haha, Connor, wahaha, like, you're so stupid. I wasted 21 powder upgrading that piece of gear. 21 powder. That's 4 pieces of like heroic gear used to upgrade a piece of gear. Even if for whatever reason you decide that, okay, like I get it, the rolls are really low, but if I pentaroll attack, if I pentaroll crit damage, if I pentaroll speed and I get a 12, God forbid, you used 61 like powder to do it. And if it's not good enough, you sell it and you lose 21, aka 4 pieces of gear worth of powder in doing that. 4 pieces of gear. 21 powder. On a ring too, by the way, in case you're curious. Now, again, if you're a veteran player and you don't want to use Goblomu, all right, I understand it. But if you are someone that can use 12 speed HP neck, like I don't even know what the max roll is. If it's either 12 or 14, I apologize. I can't like off the dome remember what it is. But if it's anywhere between 12 and 14 and you could use it for like if you could use a 12 to 14 speed F ring, attack ring, HP ring, defense, like whatever it is, ER, and you're throwing away the opportunity to get a piece like this, then I better not see you roll 1 speed purples on an offset. Like, if your gear standard is high enough that you don't need these pieces, okay. But I've also seen people, like, argue that their blue, 12 speed piece is decent for their character because they actually need it to function. Like, I'm not going to shame anyone for the gear that they roll, but make it make sense. If you're going to do that, then do this too. In any case, guys, that was just... I apologize. This was definitely like a lot more long-winded rant about this, but I've seen so many people dog on this activity, and I get it. It's not a fantastic, like, end-game, multi-purpose activity that everyone should be doing the same way that something like Rift is, and that has its own set of problems. By the way, the otherworldly chest has given me attack percent on ungodly sets, let's just say. Goblomu is not a bad set of gear, depending on when you're using it and what you're using it for. And in the same way that you wouldn't recommend someone that wants to play Ran to farm for Banshee so that you can build your Ran, Goblomu should not be farmed under certain circumstances too. And the fact is that since you have access to certain sets, if you want these sets that Goblomu has to offer, including, again, HP, Destro, crit, and speed, well, this is a perfect opportunity for you to farm out a couple pieces of gear every day, which is only 200 energy. Like, literally, if I just buy my daily packs right now, this is what? 40? If I use my arena energy, 160, 200. The energy that you get, not accounting for any AFK energy that you get, literally amounts for all that you would get from the shop. So, in conclusion, I apologize. I am not trying to like put anyone down for or try to be super negative towards people that don't want to farm for Goblomu or for people that are defending or whatever. But my point is, guys, like, it's a gacha game where you're spending a lot of your time, and if you're someone that wants to min-max, or if you're deciding on what's worth doing, actually do your research and look into what the value of this is before gatekeeping other people from doing it. You know what I mean? Like, at least if you're going to give advice, at least make it reasonably sound. You know what I mean? And to be clear, I could be wrong, but as far as I could tell, unless if there's some new unfounded value to this, I mean, getting 40% attack, even with 0 other rolls, is 40% attack. Like, there's a use for everything in this game. I just think it's ridiculous that some people aren't willing to throw up their free, their free shop gear or their free shop energy during this Epic Dash event to just get these random pieces of gear that, again, could maybe end up being really good for you. And otherwise, you lost 21 powder. Like, anyways, guys, that's going to be it for this video, though. Thanks again for watching. I apologize again for the 3rd time for ranting, but come on. What are we talking about, guys? This Goblomu gear is not Like, you've been lied to. Like, it's not actually the boogeyman that it is, and it's not the savior that people have been touting either. It's just a decent set of gear if you're a new player. I highly recommend you do it if you're a new player too, by the way. And yeah. Anyways, that's going to be it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys learned something. If you did, make sure to check out the rest of my socials, my Discord, subscribe to the channel, like and comment. Thanks again. I'll see you guys on the next one. Good night.